The violent pounding of her heart matched the roar of the wind as Victoria Carson clung desperately to her horse's mane. The world around her nothing but a swirling vortex of sand and terror. She could no longer see the trail that had guided her just moments ago, nor could she make out the mountains that had been her compass. The dust storm had descended with frightening speed, transforming the afternoon sky into a nightmarish blur of flying debris and choking particles. Each breath was a struggle, each moment a battle against the elements that threatened to swallow her whole. It was April of 1882, and Victoria had been traveling from Sacramento to Randsburg, California, to take over her late uncle's general store. At 22, she had little to her name except determination, and the skills learned from years of working alongside her father in his mercantile. When news arrived of Uncle Walter's passing and his bequest of the store to her, Victoria saw it as her chance to build something of her own. The journey had been uneventful until she left the stage at the last outpost and continued on horseback for the final stretch. The driver had warned of unstable weather, but the clear morning sky had lulled her into a false sense of security. "Steady, Penny," she whispered hoarsely to her Palomino mare, who whinnied in terror as another gust of wind sent stinging particles against them both. Victoria's eyes burned with such intensity that she could barely keep them open, and tears streamed down her dust-caked face. Her lungs felt as though they were filled with fire, and each labored breath brought more particles into her already raw throat. Victoria had heard tales of travelers lost in dust storms, their bodies discovered days later, half buried in the desert's shifting floor. Panic threatened to overwhelm her as visibility dropped to nothing, and she could no longer distinguish earth from sky. "Please, God," she prayed, burying her face in Penny's mane. "Help me find my way." The storm's fury intensified. A powerful gust lifted Victoria's hat from her head and sent it spiraling into the void. Penny reared, nearly throwing Victoria from the saddle. As she fought to regain control, something hard and fast, perhaps a piece of tumbling brush or debris, struck Victoria's temple with stunning force. Pain exploded behind her eyes and she felt herself sliding sideways. When consciousness returned, Victoria found herself sprawled on the ground, the gritty earth beneath her cheek. Penny's reins were still clutched in her fingers, the loyal mare standing nearby, trembling but present. The wind's howl had diminished to a low moan, and the worst of the storm seemed to have passed. But when Victoria tried to open her eyes, terror seized her heart. She could feel her eyelids moving, could sense a dim difference between light and dark, but could make out nothing else, no shapes, no horizon, no colors. "No," she whispered, her voice cracking as she rubbed frantically at her eyes. The pain was excruciating, but worse was the realization that followed. "I can't see. Dear God, I can't see." She forced herself to her knees, disoriented and dizzy. Victoria had no idea how long she had been unconscious or which direction led to Randsburg. The sun's position might have guided her, but without her sight, she was utterly lost in a vast, unforgiving landscape. Penny nuzzled her shoulder, and Victoria clutched the horse's face, grateful for the animal's steady presence. "You're all I have now, girl," she murmured, using the saddle to pull herself upright. Her legs trembled beneath her, and her head throbbed mercilessly. With trembling hands, Victoria felt her way back into the saddle, fear clutching her heart. She had no choice but to trust Penny to find water, shelter, or help. "Take us somewhere safe," she whispered, loosening the reins and letting the mare choose their path. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as Penny plodded forward. The sun beat down on Victoria's unprotected head and thirst clawed at her throat. Her eyes continued to burn and weep, and despair threatened to overcome her with each passing moment. "Hello there," a man's voice, deep and clear, cut through Victoria's fog of pain and fear. "Madam, are you all right?" Relief flooded Victoria's chest, but wariness quickly followed. Being blind and alone made her vulnerable in ways she'd never contemplated before. "Who's there?" she called, her voice hoarse from dust and thirst. "Name's Isaac Oberlin, madam. I've got a small ranch about 3 miles north of here." Footsteps approached, and Victoria heard the soft crunch of boots on sandy ground. "You look like you've been caught in that dust devil that passed through. Are you injured?" I can't see," Victoria admitted, her voice breaking. "The storm, something hit me, and when I woke up." "Don't try to talk too much," Isaac said, his voice suddenly closer. "Your eyes are inflamed something fierce. Mind if I help you down from that saddle? My horse is tethered just over yonder, and I can lead you both back to my place. Got clean water there and some remedies that might help." Victoria hesitated only briefly before nodding. What choice did she have? "Thank you," she managed, reaching out blindly. Strong hands grasped her waist, easing her gently to the ground. Victoria's legs buckled beneath her, and she clutched at what she presumed were Isaac's shoulders. "Easy now," he murmured. "I've got you." His voice was gentle, with a slight drawl that suggested he might have come from somewhere farther east. Victoria tried to imagine the face that belonged to the voice the man who now held her safety in his hands. "Your mare looks exhausted, but she's held up well," Isaac commented, keeping a steadying hand on Victoria's elbow while seemingly examining her horse. "What's her name?" "Penny," Victoria replied, grateful for the mundane conversation that helped calm her racing heart. "She's been with me since she was a foal. She's a fine animal, smart too, bringing you this direction. Another mile east and you'd have hit the Sullivan Ravine. It's treacherous, even with good eyesight." Victoria shuddered at the thought. "I'm Victoria Carson," she offered. "I was traveling to Randsburg to claim my uncle's store. He passed last month." "Walter Carson was your uncle?" Isaac asked, surprise evident in his tone. "Good man, fair trader. The whole town was sorry to hear of his passing." "You knew him?" Victoria asked, an unexpected connection to this stranger forming. "Everyone within 50 miles knew Walter," Isaac replied, and Victoria could hear a smile in his voice. "Come on now, Miss Carson. Let's get you somewhere safe. I'm going to lead your horse and you can hold onto my arm. It's not far to where my gelding is waiting." Isaac guided Victoria's hand to his forearm, which felt solid and strong beneath her fingers. Despite her circumstances, she found herself drawing comfort from the steady presence beside her. They walked slowly, Isaac describing the terrain as they went, warning of dips or stones in their path. Within minutes, they reached his horse. "I'm going to lift you up first," Isaac explained. "Then I'll mount behind you. That way I can make sure you don't fall." "Is that agreeable to you?" Victoria nodded, appreciating his consideration. Even in her distress, she recognized the impropriety of their situation, a single woman traveling alone with an unknown man. But social conventions meant little when weighed against survival. With surprising gentleness for hands that felt work roughened, Isaac lifted Victoria onto his horse. She heard him secure Penny's reins to his saddle horn before mounting behind her, his chest a solid presence at her back. "My place is about 20 minutes' ride," Isaac informed her, reaching around to take the reins. "Try to rest if you can. I'll make sure you don't fall." Victoria sat rigidly at first, uncomfortable with the intimacy of their position. But as exhaustion and pain overtook her, she found herself leaning back against Isaac's chest, her head occasionally dropping against his shoulder. "Tell me about your ranch," she requested, needing conversation to distract her from her fears. "It's modest," Isaac replied, his voice rumbling pleasantly against her back. 30 acres mostly, with a small herd of cattle. Got a good stream running through the property and a decent garden plot. It's not much compared to some spreads, but it's mine. You live there alone? Victoria asked, then immediately regretted the personal nature of the question. I do, Isaac answered without offense. Had a ranch hand until last fall, but he moved on to try his luck in the gold country. Been managing on my own since then. They continued to exchange simple conversation as they rode, Isaac occasionally pointing out landmarks or interesting features of the landscape that Victoria could not see. His manner was straightforward but kind, and despite her circumstances, Victoria found herself drawn to his calm demeanor. Here we are, Isaac finally announced, bringing the horse to a gentle stop. It's not much to look at, but it's solid and dry. Victoria heard the sound of a dog barking excitedly, followed by Isaac's warm greeting to the animal. That's just Rusty, he explained. Wouldn't hurt a fly, but he thinks he's fearsome. Once again, Isaac helped Victoria dismount, keeping a steady hand at her elbow as he guided her up what felt like wooden steps and into a building that smelled of wood smoke, coffee, and leather. The cabin's simple, Isaac narrated, leading her carefully across the floor. One main room with the stove and table, a small bedroom in the back. You can take the bed. I'll manage fine out here. I couldn't possibly, Victoria began to protest. You need proper rest more than I do, Isaac interrupted gently. First things first, though, we need to tend to those eyes. Sit here, he guided her to what felt like a sturdy wooden chair, while I get some clean water and cloths. Victoria sat quietly, listening to Isaac move around the cabin. The homey sounds of water being poured, a stove door opening and closing, and the soft padding of the dog across the floor created a sense of normalcy that helped calm her frayed nerves. I'm going to clean around your eyes now, Isaac warned as he returned to her side. It might sting some. His touch was gentle as he carefully wiped the dust and grime from Victoria's face with a damp cloth. She winced but held still, understanding the necessity. My mother had a remedy for eye inflammation, Isaac continued, his voice thoughtful. Chamomile tea, cooled and applied with clean cloths. I happen to have some dried chamomile. Would you permit me to try it? Yes, please, Victoria agreed readily. I'm grateful for any help. While Isaac prepared the tea, Victoria took stock of her other injuries. Her body ached from being thrown from the saddle, and her head throbbed where the debris had struck her, but nothing seemed broken. Her most pressing concern remained her eyesight. Mr. Oberlin, she began hesitantly. Isaac, please, he corrected. Isaac, Victoria amended. Do you think? Will my sight return? The brief silence that followed sent a chill down her spine. I'm no doctor, Isaac finally replied, his tone careful, but I've seen dust blindness before. Sometimes it clears up in a day or two once the inflammation subsides. Other times. He paused. We'll do everything we can, Miss Carson. Victoria, she offered quietly. Victoria, he repeated, and she could hear a smile in his voice. The tea's steeping. While we wait, let me fix you something to eat. You must be famished. The meal was simple beans, cornbread, and coffee, but to Victoria's hungry stomach, it tasted magnificent. Isaac kept the conversation light, telling her stories about Rusty's antics and describing the countryside around his ranch. After they ate, Isaac applied the cooled chamomile tea to Victoria's eyes with clean cloths. The gentle relief was immediate, though her vision remained absent. We should change these compresses every few hours, Isaac explained. For now, though, you need rest. Let me show you to the bedroom. The bed, when Victoria was finally settled in it, was firm but comfortable, the sheets clean and smelling faintly of sunshine. Though it was still daylight, exhaustion claimed her almost immediately, the trauma of the day catching up all at once. She woke sometime later to the sound of soft humming. Disoriented, Victoria opened her eyes to darkness before remembering her condition. The compresses had been removed while she slept, but the burning sensation had significantly decreased. "Isaac," she called softly. "I'm here," he answered immediately, and she heard him rise from what must have been a chair near the bed. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Victoria admitted. "Less pain, but still no sight." "It's only been a few hours," Isaac reminded her gently. "These things take time." "What time is it?" Victoria asked. "Just past sunset," Isaac replied. "You slept about 4 hours. Are you hungry again?" Victoria realized she was indeed hungry and said as much. Isaac helped her from the bed and guided her to the main room where another meal awaited. This time, they were joined by Rusty, who laid his head on Victoria's lap in a bid for attention. She found herself smiling as she stroked the dog's soft head. "He's usually more selective with his affections," Isaac commented. "You must have made quite an impression." Over the next 3 days, a routine developed. Isaac would tend to his ranch chores early in the morning, then return to check on Victoria, change her compresses, and prepare meals. He proved to be an excellent cook, a skill he attributed to years of bachelor living. "A man who can't cook is a man who goes hungry," he joked on the second evening as they shared a rabbit stew he'd prepared. During the long hours when Isaac was outside working, Victoria sat on the small porch, listening to the sounds of the ranch cattle lowing in the distance, birds singing, the occasional whinny from the horses in the corral. Rusty remained faithfully by her side, as though appointed her personal guardian. On the third morning, Victoria woke to a strange sensation. Opening her eyes, she gasped at the faint blur of light and shadow that greeted her. It wasn't much, just the barest differentiation between the dark walls and the lighter window, but it was something. "Isaac," she called, unable to contain her excitement. "Isaac, I can see light." His footsteps pounded across the cabin floor and the bedroom door creaked open. "You can see?" he asked, hope evident in his voice. "Not clearly," Victoria clarified, "just shapes and light. But yesterday there was nothing." Isaac's laugh was rich with relief. "That's wonderful news," he said, and Victoria wished desperately that she could see his face. In the days they'd spent together, she had formed a mental image of him based on his voice and the brief touches, as he helped her navigate the cabin or applied the compresses to her eyes. She imagined him tall and broad-shouldered, with kind eyes. "Let's continue with the compresses," Isaac suggested. "If you've started to improve, we want to keep that progress going." By the end of the week, Victoria's vision had improved enough that she could make out Isaac's silhouette and basic features, though details remained blurry. He was indeed tall, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and a strong jawline usually shadowed with stubble by day's end. As her vision gradually returned, Victoria insisted on helping around the cabin. Isaac taught her to navigate the small space, guiding her hands to show her where dishes were stored and how to work the stove safely. "I can't continue to impose on your hospitality indefinitely," Victoria said one evening as they sat on the porch, listening to the chorus of night insects. "Once my sight is fully restored, I need to continue to Randsburg." Though she couldn't see his expression clearly, Victoria sensed a change in Isaac's posture, a stiffening of his shoulders, perhaps. "Of course," he agreed, his tone neutral. "Though you're no imposition, Victoria." The way he said her name sent a curious warmth through her chest, a feeling she'd noticed developing over the past several days. Isaac Oberlin was unlike any man she had previously encountered, capable yet gentle, confident yet humble. He lived a solitary existence by choice, but showed no signs of the roughness or crudeness that often afflicted men who spent too much time alone. "Tell me about your life before coming west," Isaac requested, changing the subject. "You mentioned working in your father's store." Victoria nodded, grateful for the shift in conversation. "My father owned a mercantile in Springfield, Illinois. I grew up learning the business, ordering inventory, keeping the books, managing customer accounts. When my mother passed 5 years ago, I took on even more responsibility." "And your father was agreeable to you coming all this way alone?" Isaac asked, curiosity evident in his tone. Victoria sighed softly. "My father remarried last year. His new wife has a son who's been eager to take over the business. When Uncle Walter's letter came, offering me the store in Randsburg, it seemed like providence." "Walter's store is a good one," Isaac commented. "Solid business. The town's been making do with Emmett Parker managing it temporarily, but folks will be glad to have a Carson behind the counter again." "Did you visit the store often?" Victoria asked. "Every month or so," Isaac confirmed. "It's about an hour's ride from here to town. I bring butter and eggs to trade, sometimes beef when I've slaughtered. Your uncle always gave fair prices." Victoria smiled, picturing her gruff but kind-hearted uncle. "He wrote to us regularly, always encouraging me to visit. I regret never making the journey while he was alive." "He spoke of you," Isaac said quietly. "Showed me a daguerreotype once, his niece Victoria, pride of the family," he said. Smartest Carson of the lot. The revelation that Isaac had seen her image and heard about her before their meeting sent a flutter through Victoria's stomach. "He exaggerated my qualities," she demurred. "I don't believe he did," Isaac replied, his voice soft and sincere. The moment stretched between them, filled with something unspoken yet palpable. Finally, Isaac cleared his throat and stood. "It's getting late. We should turn in." The following morning, Victoria woke to discover her vision had improved dramatically overnight. While not perfect, she could now see details clearly enough to navigate without assistance. The cabin came into focus, simple but well-maintained, with sturdy furniture that showed signs of skilled craftsmanship. When Isaac entered from outside, Victoria got her first clear look at him. He was handsome in a rugged way, with intelligent blue eyes that crinkled at the corners, and a strong, expressive mouth currently curved in surprise at finding her standing unaided in the middle of the room. "You can see clearly now?" he asked, removing his hat. "Much better," Victoria confirmed, unable to stop staring now that she could finally observe the man who had shown her such kindness. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30, with a tan that spoke of long days working outdoors. "I can make out everything in the cabin and your face." Isaac smiled, and the warmth of it transformed his features. "That's the best news I've heard all week." "I should be able to continue to Randsburg soon," Victoria said, though the words brought a surprising pang of regret. "There's no rush," Isaac replied quickly. "The store isn't going anywhere, and you should be fully recovered before traveling." Victoria nodded, secretly relieved at the reprieve. Over the following days, as her vision continued to improve, she found herself studying Isaac when he wasn't looking, the careful way he handled tools, the gentleness he showed to animals, the quiet competence with which he approached every task. One afternoon, Isaac invited Victoria to accompany him to check on a new calf. With her sight largely restored, she eagerly accepted, grateful for the chance to escape the confines of the cabin. Isaac helped her mount Penny, who had been well tended during Victoria's recovery, and led the way across the rolling landscape. Victoria drew in deep breaths of the clean air, marveling at the beauty of Isaac's land. The spring grasses waved in the gentle breeze, and wildflowers dotted the meadows with splashes of color. In the distance, mountains rose against a perfectly blue sky, the same mountains that had been her landmark before the dust storm changed everything. "It's beautiful here," she commented as they rode side by side. "It suits me," Isaac replied modestly. "Took 5 years to save enough for the down payment, and another 3 to build the cabin and outbuildings. Still paying off the bank loan, but the land's productive enough." "You've accomplished a great deal on your own," Victoria observed admiringly. Isaac shrugged, though she detected pleasure in his expression. "A man needs purpose. This land gives me that." They crested a gentle hill, and Isaac pointed to a small creek lined with cottonwood trees. "That's our destination. The new mother has been keeping her calf in that protected spot." As they approached, Victoria spotted the cow and her calf resting in the dappled shade. The baby was wobble-legged and adorable, with a white star on its forehead. "She's doing well," Isaac commented after examining the pair from a respectful distance. "Good mother, strong calf. That's all a rancher can ask for." They dismounted by the creek, and Isaac suggested they rest a while before returning. Victoria settled on a sun-warmed rock while Isaac checked Penny's tack, making adjustments to ensure her comfort. "How did you come to ranching?" Victoria asked, genuinely curious about the path that had led this thoughtful man to this remote but lovely place. Isaac finished with Penny before sitting nearby, stretching his long legs before him. "My father was a blacksmith in Missouri. I apprenticed under him until I was 20, then the wanderlust hit me. Traveled west, worked cattle drives, mining camps, whatever would pay. Saw a lot of country that way." "What made you stop here?" Victoria prompted when he fell silent. Isaac's gaze swept across the landscape, appreciation evident in his expression. "Rode through this valley and something just clicked. Felt right in a way no other place had. Took a job at the miller spread north of here, saved every penny, then found this parcel when old man Thornton decided to sell and move to San Francisco." Victoria nodded in understanding. "You found your place in the world." "I did," Isaac agreed, then looked at her curiously. "What about you? Will Randsburg be your place?" The question gave Victoria pause. Until the dust storm, she had been so certain of her path: take over Uncle Walter's store, build a life for herself in Randsburg, perhaps eventually marry and raise a family there. Now, after days in Isaac's company, the simplicity of his life and the contentment he found in it had her questioning whether a busy town was truly where she belonged. "I'm not sure," she admitted honestly. "I've always enjoyed commerce and believe I'll do well with the store, but... Isaac prompted gently when she trailed off. "But I've never lived anywhere but in town," Victoria finished. "These past days, despite my injury, have shown me there's something special about life closer to the land." Isaac's expression was contemplative as he gazed at her. "The store in town and an appreciation for country living aren't mutually exclusive, you know. Randsburg is just an hour's ride from here." The implication hung between them, unspoken but clear. Before Victoria could respond, the cow gave a warning bellow, drawing Isaac to his feet. "Something spooked her," he said, scanning the area. His hand moved to the revolver at his hip, a weapon Victoria hadn't noticed before. A moment later, a rattling sound caused Victoria to freeze. "Snake," she whispered. Isaac nodded tersely, pointing to a spot about 10 feet away where a large rattlesnake was coiled, its warning clear. "Don't move suddenly," Isaac instructed calmly. "I'm going to distract it, then you walk slowly back toward the horses." Before Victoria could protest, Isaac picked up a long stick and moved deliberately to place himself between her and the snake. With careful precision, he used the stick to direct the rattler's attention away from Victoria. "Now," he said quietly, "move slow and steady." Victoria rose and backed away as instructed, her heart pounding. She'd heard enough stories about rattlesnake bites to know their deadliness. Once she reached the horses, she watched anxiously as Isaac continued to manage the snake, eventually encouraging it to slither away in the opposite direction. Only when the rattler had disappeared into the underbrush did Isaac relax, dropping the stick and rejoining Victoria by the horses. "That fellow was just defending his territory," he commented. "No harm done." "You handled that so calmly," Victoria said, impressed by his composure. "Country living teaches you to respect nature's dangers without fearing them excessively," Isaac replied with a modest smile. "Shall we head back? The excitement's probably enough for your first outing." As they rode back to the cabin, Victoria found herself watching Isaac with new appreciation. His quiet confidence in the face of danger, his respect for the natural world, and his gentle strength all combined to create a man unlike any she had known before. That evening, as they sat at Isaac's table sharing a meal of cornbread and beans, Victoria made a decision. "I'd like to head to Randsburg tomorrow if you think I'm well enough to travel," she announced. Isaac's fork paused midway to his mouth, and something like disappointment flickered in his eyes before he carefully masked it. "Your eyes seem fully recovered," he acknowledged. "If that's what you wish, I'd be happy to escort you." "Thank you," Victoria said sincerely. "Not just for the escort, but for everything these past days. You saved my life, Isaac." "Anyone would have done the same," he demurred. "No," Victoria insisted. "Not everyone would have taken in a stranger, tended her injuries, and shown such care and respect. You're a good man, Isaac Oberlin." Color rose in Isaac's cheeks at her praise, and he ducked his head slightly. "You're easy to care for, Victoria Carson." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither seemed ready to acknowledge directly. Instead, they finished their meal in companionable silence, each lost in private thoughts about what tomorrow would bring. The next morning dawned clear and mild, perfect for traveling. Isaac had Penny saddled and ready alongside his own mount by the time Victoria emerged from the cabin, dressed in her now clean travel clothes. She carried the small carpet bag that held her few possessions, saved from the dust storm by being securely tied to Penny's saddle. "Are you certain you're ready?" Isaac asked as he helped her mount. "You're welcome to stay longer if you'd like." Victoria hesitated, tempted by the offer, but shook her head. "I need to see the store to understand what Uncle Walter left me, but I would welcome your continued friendship, Isaac." Something like relief crossed Isaac's features. "Of course," he agreed readily. "Randsburg isn't far. I come into town regularly for supplies." As they rode side by side toward town, Victoria found herself studying the landscape more carefully, noting landmarks that would help her find her way back to Isaac's ranch independently in the future. The thought surprised her with its clarity. She definitely wanted to return. "Tell me about Randsburg," she requested. "What are the people like? Who should I know?" Isaac seemed pleased by her interest and spent the journey describing the small but growing town. He spoke of Mayor Donaldson, who doubled as the town's only lawyer, Mrs. Peterson, who ran the boarding house where Victoria might stay until the living quarters above the store could be prepared, and various other characters who made up the community. "Most folks are decent, hardworking people," Isaac summarized. "They'll welcome you, especially as Walter's niece." He was well respected. As they crested a final hill, Randsburg came into view, a collection of wooden buildings strung along a main street, with scattered houses and businesses expanding outward. It was smaller than Victoria had imagined, but appeared neat and prosperous enough. "The store is that two-story building on the corner," Isaac pointed. "Living quarters are upstairs, store below. It's one of the oldest buildings in town. Victoria studied her inheritance with interest. The store was substantial, with a covered porch spanning its front and large display windows. Even from a distance, she could see customers entering and exiting, a good sign for business. When they reached the edge of town, Victoria noticed Isaac slowing his horse. "Something wrong?" she asked. He shook his head but seemed suddenly hesitant. "You'll be entering your new life," he said quietly. I hope it brings you happiness, Victoria." The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. "Will you come into the store with me?" she asked. "I'd feel better having a friendly face beside me for the introduction." Relief flooded Isaac's expression. "I'd be honored," he agreed. As they rode down the main street, Victoria became aware of curious glances from townsfolk. Their interest seemed to intensify when they recognized Isaac riding beside her, and she wondered briefly about his standing in the community. They hitched their horses outside Carson's general store, and Victoria took a deep breath to steady her nerves. Isaac offered his arm, which she gratefully accepted, drawing comfort from his solid presence. The bell above the door jingled as they entered, and several customers turned to look. Behind the counter stood a middle-aged man with spectacles perched on his nose, who smiled in recognition at Isaac before his gaze shifted curiously to Victoria. "Emmett," Isaac called, guiding Victoria forward. "May I present Miss Victoria Carson, Walter's niece from Illinois?" The man's eyes widened and he hurried around the counter, hand extended. "Miss Carson, we've been expecting you for over a week. When you didn't arrive, we feared something might have happened on your journey." "Something did," Isaac explained before Victoria could speak. "Miss Carson was caught in that dust storm last week. It temporarily affected her vision. She's been recovering at my ranch." Murmurs of concern rose from the customers in the store, and Victoria soon found herself surrounded by townspeople, each introducing themselves and offering welcome or sympathy for her ordeal. "Mr. Parker has been managing the store admirably," Victoria said once the initial flurry of introductions subsided. "I'm grateful for his stewardship." "Just doing my duty to Walter," Emmett replied. "He was good to me over the years." "I'm happy to continue helping until you're settled, Miss Carson." "I appreciate that," Victoria said sincerely. "I'd like to familiarize myself with the operation before making any changes." As Emmett began showing Victoria around the store, she was conscious of Isaac hanging back, as though uncertain of his place in this new chapter of her life. When she glanced back at him, he gave her an encouraging smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mr. Oberlin," called a woman's voice, and Victoria turned to see an elegantly dressed blonde approaching Isaac. "What a pleasant surprise to see you in town on a weekday." "Miss Harrington," Isaac acknowledged with a polite nod. "I was escorting Miss Carson to town." The woman Miss Harrington turned her attention to Victoria, assessing her with sharp eyes. "So you're Walter's niece," she said, extending a gloved hand. "I'm Beatrice Harrington. My father owns the bank. Welcome to Randsburg." Victoria accepted the handshake, noting the slight emphasis Beatrice had placed on her father's position. "Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you." "Isaac," Beatrice continued, turning back to him with a warm smile that struck Victoria as somewhat proprietary. "Father was just saying yesterday that we haven't seen you at Sunday dinner in ages. You must join us this week." Before Isaac could respond, the store door opened again, and a distinguished older gentleman entered. "Ah, Mayor Donaldson," Emmett called. "Come meet Walter's niece." The next hour passed in a blur of introductions and conversations. Victoria did her best to remember names and connections, to ask appropriate questions about the store and town. But she found her attention repeatedly drawn to Isaac, who remained quietly at the edge of the gathering, occasionally engaging in conversation when directly addressed. Finally, Mrs. Peterson arrived to offer Victoria accommodation at the boarding house until she could move into the rooms above the store. "They need a good cleaning," the motherly woman explained. "Walter was a dear man, but not the most thorough housekeeper. I've arranged for the Wilkins girls to help with the scrubbing tomorrow." "That's very kind," Victoria acknowledged gratefully. As arrangements were being made for Victoria's trunks to be collected from the stage office where they had arrived days earlier, Isaac approached her quietly. "It seems you're in good hands," he observed, his expression carefully neutral. "Mrs. Peterson runs a fine boarding house, and Emmett knows the store operation inside and out." Victoria sensed he was preparing to leave and felt a surprising pang at the thought. "Will you call on me soon?" she asked impulsively. Something flickered in Isaac's eyes, hope, perhaps. "If you'd like me to," he replied cautiously. "I would," Victoria confirmed. "Perhaps you could show me more of the town when I've had a chance to settle in." The smile that spread across Isaac's face was worth any social impropriety her forward request might have caused. "It would be my pleasure," he agreed. Their parting was necessarily brief, observed as they were by curious townspeople, but Victoria found herself watching Isaac's retreating figure long after he mounted his horse and rode away, Penny following on a lead rope. He had promised to stable her mare at his ranch until Victoria had suitable arrangements in town. The following days were a whirlwind of activity as Victoria settled into her new role. The store proved to be well stocked and orderly, though she quickly identified opportunities for improvement and expansion. Emmett Parker was a valuable resource, patiently explaining the particulars of various customer accounts and the seasonal patterns of trade. The living quarters above the store, once thoroughly cleaned, revealed themselves to be surprisingly spacious and comfortable. Victoria found traces of her uncle throughout books he had enjoyed, a collection of interesting rocks on the windowsill, a comfortable chair positioned to catch the evening light for reading. Though she had not seen him in many years, inhabiting his space brought a sense of connection that comforted her. Through it all, Victoria found her thoughts frequently turning to Isaac. She wondered what he was doing on his ranch, whether he missed her company as she missed his. Their days together during her recovery had created a bond that felt significant, despite its brevity. When Isaac appeared at the store 4 days after their arrival in town, Victoria's heart leapt at the sight of him. He wore clean clothes and had trimmed his beard, giving him a more polished appearance than she was accustomed to seeing. "Miss Carson," he greeted her formally, mindful of the customers browsing nearby. "I trust you're settling in well." "Very well, thank you, Mr. Oberlin," Victoria replied with equal formality, though she couldn't suppress a smile. "How is Penny faring?" "She seems quite content," Isaac assured her, "though I suspect she misses your company." Their eyes met across the counter, and Victoria understood he wasn't speaking only of the horse. "Perhaps I could visit her soon," she suggested, "to reassure myself of her welfare." "She would like that very much," Isaac replied, a smile tugging at his mouth. "As would I." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Beatrice Harrington, who swept into the store in a rustle of expensive fabric. "Isaac, what a delightful coincidence!" she exclaimed, though Victoria suspected there was nothing coincidental about her appearance. "Have you reconsidered Father's dinner invitation?" Isaac shifted uncomfortably. "I haven't had the chance to respond yet, Miss Harrington. I've been quite busy with the spring calving." Beatrice pouted prettily. "All work and no socializing makes for a dull life, Isaac." "Surely you can spare one evening." Before Isaac could respond, Victoria found herself speaking. "Actually, "Mr. Oberlin has kindly agreed to acquaint me with the town and its surroundings," she said smoothly. "As a newcomer, I'm eager to learn my way around." Beatrice's smile tightened almost imperceptibly as her gaze shifted between them. "How neighborly of him," she commented. "Though I'm sure others in town would be happy to show you around, Miss Carson. Isaac's time is valuable with his ranch responsibilities." "It's no trouble," Isaac interjected firmly. "I'm happy to help Miss Carson become familiar with her new home." The tension in the air was palpable until another customer called for Victoria's assistance with a purchase. By the time she finished the transaction, Beatrice had departed, and Isaac was examining a display of tools with studied interest. "I apologize if I overstepped," Victoria said quietly when she rejoined him. "I didn't mean to speak for you." "You didn't overstep," Isaac assured her, his voice equally low. "Beatrice Harrington has been persistent in her attention since she returned from finishing school in San Francisco last year. Her father would like to see us matched, for business reasons more than romantic ones." "And you're not interested?" Victoria asked, trying to keep her tone merely curious rather than revealing her personal stake in his answer. Isaac's gaze met hers directly. "No," he said simply. "I'm not interested in Beatrice Harrington." The significance of his statement and the way he held Victoria's gaze while making it sent warmth blooming through her chest. "I see," she murmured. "When might you be free for that tour of the town?" Isaac asked, changing the subject. "Tomorrow, perhaps?" Victoria nodded eagerly. "Tomorrow would be perfect. Emmett has offered to mind the store so I can become better acquainted with Randsburg." "I'll call for you at 10 then," Isaac suggested. "Weather permitting, we might ride out to the lake after seeing the town. It's beautiful this time of year." After Isaac departed, Victoria found herself humming as she worked, her spirits lighter than they had been in days. Emmett noticed her improved mood and commented on it with gentle teasing. "Mr. Oberlin seems to have brightened your day considerably," he observed while they were restocking shelves after the store closed. Victoria felt a blush rise to her cheeks, but didn't deny it. "He was very kind to me during my recovery," she said simply. Emmett nodded thoughtfully. "He's a good man, Isaac Oberlin. Quiet, keeps to himself mostly, but always ready to help a neighbor in need. This town respects him." "What about his social standing?" Victoria asked carefully. "Miss Harrington seems quite interested in him." Emmett chuckled knowingly. "Ah, yes. The banker's daughter has set her cap for him, that's certain. Richard Harrington sees Isaac's land as a prime opportunity for expansion. The property adjoins his own holdings and he's been trying to acquire it for years." "And Isaac won't sell," Victoria guessed. "Not a chance," Emmett confirmed. "That land means everything to him. He's turned down offers well above its market value." This information added another dimension to Victoria's understanding of Isaac. His dedication to his ranch went beyond mere livelihood. It was, as he had said, his purpose. The next day dawned clear and mild, perfect for exploring. Victoria dressed with care in a practical blue skirt and white shirtwaist, adding a straw bonnet trimmed with ribbon as protection against the sun. When Isaac arrived precisely at 10, leading both his gelding and Penny, Victoria was waiting eagerly. "Your mare seems happy to see you," Isaac commented as Penny nickered in recognition. Victoria stroked the horse's velvet nose affectionately. "I've missed her too," she admitted. "Thank you for bringing her." Their tour of Randsburg was thoroughly enjoyable. Isaac showed Victoria the small schoolhouse, the church that doubled as a community meeting hall, the blacksmith shop run by brothers from Ohio, and various other establishments that formed the backbone of the growing town. The railroad survey team was through last fall. Isaac explained as they rode slowly down a side street. If they decide to put a spur line through Randsburg, the town could grow considerably in the next few years. That would be good for business, Victoria mused, thinking of the possibilities for expanding the store's offerings. For some, Isaac agreed, though his tone held reservation. Growth brings opportunity but changes the character of a place. Some of us appreciate Randsburg's quieter nature. After completing their circuit of the town, Isaac suggested they continue to the lake he had mentioned. Victoria readily agreed, eager to spend more time in his company and to explore the countryside that was now her home. They rode at a leisurely pace, Isaac pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about the area's history. He was knowledgeable about the land and its natural features, speaking with obvious passion about the seasonal changes he had observed over his years of ranching. "There it is," he finally announced, gesturing toward a sparkling expanse of water nestled in a small valley. Shadow Lake. The sight was even more beautiful than Victoria had anticipated. The lake's surface reflected the blue sky and surrounding cottonwood trees, its shores lined with spring wildflowers. A pair of ducks glided across the water, leaving rippling wakes behind them. "It's lovely," Victoria breathed as Isaac helped her dismount in a shady spot near the shore. "I thought you'd appreciate it," Isaac replied, sounding pleased by her reaction. "Few people from town venture out this way, especially the ladies. It's a bit too far for a casual outing." "Their loss," Victoria commented, removing her bonnet to feel the gentle breeze on her face. "I can't imagine a more perfect spot." Isaac spread a blanket he'd brought in his saddlebag, and they sat together watching the play of light on the water. He had packed a simple lunch of bread, cheese, and apples, which they shared companionably. "How are you finding merchant life again?" Isaac asked as they ate. "Is the store what you expected?" Victoria considered the question thoughtfully. "The store itself is wonderful, better stocked than I anticipated, with loyal customers. Uncle Walter clearly built a strong foundation. But," Isaac prompted, hearing the hesitation in her voice, "but I find myself missing the quiet of your ranch more than I expected," Victoria admitted softly. "The constant interaction with customers and townspeople is tiring in a way I hadn't remembered from my father's store." Isaac studied her face with interest. "The solitude of country living isn't for everyone," he commented. "Many find it too isolating after town life." "I thought I might feel that way," Victoria agreed, "but instead I find myself looking forward to moments of peace. Is that strange?" "Not to me," Isaac replied with a small smile, "but I'm hardly objective on the matter." Their conversation flowed easily from topic to topic: books they had enjoyed, places they hoped to visit someday, childhood memories both fond and difficult. Victoria found herself sharing things she had rarely spoken of, including her complicated feelings about her father's remarriage and her stepbrother's eager assumption of her role in the family business. "He made me feel replaceable," she confessed. "As though my years of work meant nothing compared to Edward's male birthright." Isaac's expression darkened with indignation on her behalf. "That wasn't fair to you," he said firmly. "Experience and dedication should count for more than accidents of birth." "Thank you," Victoria said, touched by his understanding. "Uncle Walter seemed to think so too, which is why he left me the store." "Walter was a progressive thinker in many ways," Isaac agreed. "He believed people should be judged by their character and actions, not their circumstances." As the afternoon progressed, Victoria became increasingly aware of a shifting dynamic between herself and Isaac. Their shared ordeal had created a foundation of trust, but this day together was building something more: a genuine connection based on mutual understanding and respect. When Isaac helped her remount Penny for the journey back to town, his hands lingered slightly longer than necessary at her waist. Victoria found herself hoping he might call on her again soon, perhaps even make his intentions clear. However, the weeks that followed brought both joy and frustration. Isaac visited the store regularly, usually with legitimate reasons like trading his ranch products or purchasing supplies, but always making time to speak with Victoria. Their conversations remained friendly but carefully proper, mindful of the public setting and observant eyes. Beatrice Harrington, meanwhile, increased her efforts to secure Isaac's attention. She arranged to visit the store whenever he was present and orchestrated chance meetings around town. Victoria tried not to let jealousy cloud her judgment, but she found herself growing increasingly concerned that Isaac might eventually yield to the pressure from Randsburg's most influential family. One afternoon in late May, Victoria was reviewing the store's accounts when Emmett entered from the storeroom looking concerned. "Miss Carson," he said hesitantly, "there's something you should know." Mr. Harrington was just at the bank board meeting discussing foreclosure proceedings on several properties. Victoria looked up, instantly alert. "And this concerns the store." "Not the store, no," Emmett clarified. "It's the Oberlin Ranch. Apparently, Isaac has missed 2 loan payments." Shock rippled through Victoria. Isaac had never mentioned financial difficulties, though she recalled his comment about still paying off the bank loan for his land. "Are you certain?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Emmett nodded grimly. "My brother-in-law works at the bank. Harrington is pushing for immediate action, despite Isaac's previously perfect payment record. Word is, there was a problem with the cattle buyer. Isaac was counting on the man backed out of a deal at the last minute, leaving Isaac without the funds he was expecting." Victoria's mind raced. If Isaac lost his ranch, the land he loved so deeply, he would be devastated. And if Richard Harrington acquired it, as seemed to be his plan. "How much is the outstanding amount?" she asked decisively. Emmett named a sum that made Victoria's eyes widen. It represented nearly half of her savings money she had been planning to use for store improvements and inventory expansion. "Thank you for telling me, Emmett," she said after a moment's consideration. "Would you mind watching the store for an hour? I need to visit the bank." Without waiting for his response, Victoria retrieved her ledger from the office and headed directly to Randsburg's only bank. She had met Richard Harrington only briefly since her arrival in town, but had formed a clear impression of a man who valued power and influence above all else. The bank was quiet when Victoria entered, with only one teller assisting an elderly customer. She requested a meeting with Mr. Harrington and was shown to his office after only a brief wait. Richard Harrington was a tall, imposing man with silver hair and cold eyes that assessed Victoria with obvious calculation as she entered. "Miss Carson," he greeted her with practiced cordiality, "to what do I owe this pleasure?" "I understand you're considering foreclosure proceedings against Mr. Oberlin's ranch," Victoria stated directly, seeing no benefit in pleasantries. Harrington's eyebrows rose slightly at her bluntness. "Banking matters are confidential, Miss Carson." "Of course," Victoria acknowledged. "However, as I'm interested in investing in Mr. Oberlin's operation, I thought it prudent to understand the current situation." This caught Harrington's attention, as Victoria had intended. "Investing," he repeated, his tone skeptical. "In what capacity?" "A business partnership," Victoria improvised. "Mr. Oberlin produces excellent quality goods that my store can distribute more widely. It would be beneficial for both our enterprises." Harrington leaned back in his chair, studying her with new interest. "I see. And this?" "Partnership would involve financial support sufficient to address his current obligations." "It would," Victoria confirmed, opening her ledger to reveal the figures she had hastily calculated on her walk to the bank. "I'm prepared to settle Mr. Oberlin's outstanding payments immediately, with a view to restructuring the loan terms for future stability." What followed was a tense negotiation. Harrington clearly resented Victoria's intervention, but could find no legitimate reason to refuse payment that would bring a delinquent loan current. By the time she left the bank, Victoria had not only paid Isaac's missed payments, but had negotiated more favorable terms for the remaining balance. She had also made an enemy of Richard Harrington, a fact she acknowledged with grim satisfaction. Any man who would manipulate financial circumstances to seize another's livelihood was not someone whose goodwill she valued. The question now was how to inform Isaac of her actions without wounding his pride. Victoria knew enough about him to understand that accepting help, especially financial help, would not come easily to him. She deliberated through the afternoon and evening, finally deciding that directness was the only appropriate approach. The next morning, she closed the store temporarily and rode Penny out to Isaac's ranch, her heart pounding with nervousness about his potential reaction. She found him mending a fence in the south pasture, his shirt darkened with sweat from the morning's labor. He looked up in surprise as she approached, confusion and pleasure mingling in his expression. "Victoria," he greeted her, setting aside his tools. "This is unexpected." Victoria dismounted, gathering her courage. "I needed to speak with you about something important," she said, deciding to plunge directly into the matter. "I visited the bank yesterday." Isaac stilled, wariness replacing his initial welcome. "The bank?" "Mr. Harrington was planning to begin foreclosure proceedings on your ranch," Victoria explained, watching his face carefully. "I learned about it from Emmett." Color drained from Isaac's features, followed by a flush of what appeared to be shame. "My arrangement with the cattle buyer fell through," he said stiffly. "I was planning to speak with Harrington about an extension." "He had no intention of granting one," Victoria said gently. "Emmett's brother-in-law works at the bank. Harrington was specifically targeting your property." Isaac's jaw tightened and he looked away, gazing across his land with pained eyes. "I suppose you've come to warn me then. I appreciate the courtesy, though I wish it hadn't come to this." "No," Victoria corrected him. "I've come to tell you that I've settled the outstanding payments and renegotiated the terms of your loan." For a moment, Isaac simply stared at her, disbelief written across his features. "You did what?" "I paid the missed payments," Victoria repeated steadily. "And I convinced Harrington to offer more reasonable terms moving forward." A complex series of emotions crossed Isaac's face: relief, confusion, and finally, a flare of pride that made Victoria's heart sink. "I can't accept that," he said flatly. "It's not your responsibility to rescue me from my financial difficulties." "I'm not rescuing you," Victoria argued. "I'm investing in a business relationship. Your ranch produces goods my store can sell. It makes perfect economic sense." Isaac shook his head, unconvinced. "You used your own money meant for your store, your future, to pay my debts." "Yes," Victoria acknowledged, "because I believe in you and in what you're building here. Also," she added with deliberate lightness, "because I greatly enjoy making Richard Harrington's plans go awry." Despite himself, Isaac's mouth twitched with reluctant amusement at this last comment. He must have been furious. "Incandescent," Victoria confirmed with a small smile, though far too practiced in banking courtesy to show it openly. Isaac ran a hand through his hair, still visibly struggling with her intervention. "I'll pay you back," he insisted. "Every penny with interest." "I know you will," Victoria agreed easily. "I've brought the paperwork for a formal business agreement if you'd like to review it." This approach, treating the matter as a business transaction rather than charity, seemed to ease some of Isaac's discomfort. He agreed to look over the documents, and they walked together to the cabin, where Victoria produced the papers she had carefully prepared. The agreement was straightforward. Isaac would supply the store with fresh produce, meat, and dairy products at agreed-upon prices, with a percentage of the profits going toward repayment of Victoria's investment. It was fair to both parties while providing the structure Isaac needed to preserve his dignity. As Isaac read through the terms, his expression gradually softened. "This is very reasonable," he admitted. "You've thought this through carefully." "I have," Victoria confirmed. "It's important to me that you keep this ranch, Isaac, not just because it makes business sense, but because I know what this land means to you." Their eyes met across the table, and something shifted in Isaac's gaze, a warming, a deepening. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why would you do this for me?" Victoria took a deep breath, knowing they had reached a crucial juncture. "Because in the short time I've known you, I've come to care deeply about your happiness," she said honestly. "And because I believe we could build something meaningful together, something beyond business." For a breathless moment, Isaac remained silent, his eyes searching hers. Then he stood, circled the table, and took her hands in his. "From the moment I found you lost in that dust storm, something changed in me," he confessed. "I've never met anyone like you, Victoria, brave enough to start a new life alone, kind enough to see value in a simple rancher, and stubborn enough to face down Richard Harrington on my behalf." Victoria smiled up at him, her heart racing. "Does this mean you accept the business arrangement?" She teased gently. "I accept the business arrangement," Isaac confirmed, his thumbs tracing circles on the backs of her hands. "And I would like to propose a personal one as well, if you're amenable." "What did you have in mind?" Victoria asked, though her hopeful heart already knew. "Court you properly," Isaac said simply, "with the intention of offering you a more permanent partnership, should you find yourself inclined to consider it." Joy bubbled up in Victoria's chest, bright and effervescent. "I find myself very much inclined to consider it," she assured him. Isaac's smile was radiant as he lifted her hand to his lips. "Then we have an agreement, Miss Carson, both business and personal." The months that followed brought both challenges and joys. Victoria's investment in Isaac's ranch proved profitable for the store, as his high-quality products attracted customers from surrounding areas. The business partnership flourished alongside their personal relationship, with Isaac calling formally at the store several times each week. Randsburg society quickly noted the developing attachment between the store owner and the rancher. Most townspeople approved, seeing it as a natural match between two hardworking, respected individuals. Beatrice Harrington, predictably, did not share this view and made her disapproval known through pointed remarks and calculated snubs. Her father's antagonism took more concerning forms, including attempts to disrupt Isaac's business arrangements with other ranchers and merchants. Despite these obstacles, Victoria and Isaac grew steadily closer. They attended church together on Sundays, shared meals with friends, and enjoyed quiet rides through the countryside whenever Victoria could leave the store in Emmett's capable hands. Isaac proved to be a thoughtful suitor, bringing small gifts that showed his attention to Victoria's preferences. Wildflowers he knew she admired, a book by her favorite author found in a catalog, a handcrafted wooden box for her hairpins. By autumn, Victoria had fully settled into her role as Randsburg's general store proprietor. She had introduced several successful innovations, including a wider selection of fabric and notions that attracted female customers from neighboring towns. The living quarters above the store had been transformed into a comfortable home that reflected her personality, while honoring Uncle Walter's legacy. On a crisp October evening, Isaac invited Victoria for a special outing to celebrate the successful cattle sale that had allowed him to make a substantial payment against his bank loan. He arrived at the store at closing time, looking unusually nervous despite his carefully pressed shirt and polished boots. "I thought we might ride out to Shadow Lake," he suggested. "The autumn colors are at their peak, and I've packed a picnic supper." Victoria readily agreed, intrigued by his evident excitement about this particular outing. They rode in companionable conversation, discussing the town's preparations for the upcoming Harvest Festival and Isaac's plans for winter improvements to the ranch buildings. When they reached the lake, Victoria gasped in delight at the transformation. The cottonwood trees that lined the shore had turned brilliant gold, their reflection in the water creating a scene of extraordinary beauty. Isaac had timed their arrival perfectly. The setting sun cast everything in a warm, golden light that seemed almost magical. "It's breathtaking," Victoria murmured as Isaac helped her dismount. "Just wait," he replied with a mysterious smile, taking her hand and leading her to a spot he had clearly prepared in advance. A blanket was already spread beneath the largest cottonwood, with a basket waiting nearby. More surprising were the small lanterns hung from the lower branches, ready to be lit as darkness fell. "When did you arrange all this?" Victoria asked, delighted by his thoughtfulness. "I rode out early this morning," Isaac admitted, looking pleased by her reaction. "I wanted tonight to be special." They settled on the blanket, and Isaac unpacked a feast far more elaborate than their usual picnic fare: cold chicken, freshly baked bread, cheese from the dairy farm north of town, and a bottle of wine that must have been specially ordered from Sacramento. As they ate, watching the sun sink lower and the first stars appear, Victoria was struck by a profound sense of contentment. In the 6 months since the dust storm that had nearly claimed her life, she had found not only a new home and purpose, but also a love she hadn't known to hope for. When they had finished eating, Isaac grew noticeably quiet, his expression thoughtful as he gazed out over the water. Finally, he turned to her, taking both her hands in his. "Victoria," he began, his voice uncharacteristically unsteady, "when I found you that day, blinded by the dust storm and lost on the trail, I had no idea how completely you would change my life. I thought I was content with my solitary existence, with just the land and animals for company. But now I can't imagine returning to that life." Victoria's heart began to race as she recognized the significance of the moment. "Isaac," he squeezed her hands gently, asking silently for her patience as he continued, "I know we come from different worlds in many ways. You're educated and cultured while I'm just a simple rancher. But I believe we complement each other: your vision and my perseverance, your warmth and my stability." Reaching into his pocket, Isaac withdrew a small velvet box. "Victoria Carson, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Would you join your life with mine, bringing together the store and the ranch, the town and the country, in a partnership I would cherish until my dying day?" When he opened the box, Victoria saw a delicate gold ring set with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds, elegant but not ostentatious, perfectly suited to her taste and circumstances. "Yes," she whispered, tears of joy filling her eyes. "Yes, Isaac, I would be honored to be your wife." His hands trembled slightly as he slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he was pulling her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the love and promise that words could not adequately express. When they finally parted, breathless and smiling, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I've been carrying this ring for weeks," he confessed, "waiting for the perfect moment." This was indeed perfect, Victoria assured him, glancing around at the glowing lanterns and golden leaves trembling in the gentle breeze. "I couldn't have imagined a more beautiful proposal." Their engagement announcement caused a stir in Randsburg, generating reactions from hearty congratulations to thinly veiled disapproval from the Harrington faction. Victoria and Isaac weathered the mixed response with dignity, focusing instead on their plans for joining their lives and businesses. They decided on a December wedding, to be held in Randsburg's church with a reception at the town hall afterward. Victoria wrote to her father and stepmother, extending an invitation they politely declined, citing the difficulty of winter travel. Though disappointed, Victoria found that the absence of her original family mattered less than expected, as she had formed meaningful connections in her new community. Preparations for the wedding coincided with the busiest season for the store, as Christmas merchandise and winter necessities brought a steady stream of customers. Isaac divided his time between winter ranch work and helping Victoria with wedding arrangements, proving himself a surprisingly thoughtful partner in decision-making. On a practical level, they agreed that Victoria would maintain the store while Isaac continued managing the ranch, with each supporting the other's enterprise. They would divide their time between the ranch and the rooms above the store, depending on seasonal needs and business demands. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, with a dusting of fresh snow that transformed Randsburg into a picture-perfect winter scene. Victoria dressed in the back room of the store, assisted by Mrs. Peterson and several other women who had become dear friends during her months in town. Her gown was simple but elegant ivory satin with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, complemented by a veil that had belonged to Mrs. Peterson's daughter. As Victoria studied her reflection in the mirror, she barely recognized the confident, radiant woman who gazed back at her, so different from the frightened, blinded girl who had clung to her horse in the midst of a dust storm just 8 months earlier. The ceremony itself was everything Victoria had hoped for, intimate yet joyful, solemn yet filled with hope. Isaac waited for her at the altar, his expression one of wonder and devotion as she walked toward him on Emmett's arm. Their vows were personal and heartfelt, promises to support and cherish each other through whatever challenges life might bring. As they exited the church as husband and wife, the entire town seemed to have gathered to witness their happiness. Even Beatrice Harrington, standing stiffly beside her father, offered a tight nod of acknowledgement. The reception that followed was a true community celebration, with tables laden with dishes contributed by every household in Randsburg. Music, dancing, and laughter filled the town hall until well past midnight, when the newly married couple finally slipped away to begin their life together. Their first home as husband and wife was the ranch house, which Isaac had spent weeks improving for Victoria's comfort. He had added curtains to the windows, built new shelves for her books, and installed a larger stove for cooking and baking. Though simple, the cabin felt like home from the moment Victoria crossed its threshold, no longer as a blinded storm victim, but as a beloved wife. Spring brought new beginnings as Victoria discovered she was expecting their first child. The news delighted Isaac beyond measure. He immediately began making plans for a nursery addition to the cabin, and insisted on hiring extra help at both the ranch and store to ensure Victoria didn't overtire herself. Their son, Walter Emmett Oberlin, was born on a warm September day in 1883, a healthy, robust baby with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined chin. He became the center of their world, adored not only by his parents but by the entire town of Randsburg, who viewed him as a symbol of the community's future. As the years passed, the Oberlin family grew and prospered. The general store expanded to include a second building dedicated to agricultural supplies and equipment. The ranch increased its holdings through the purchase of adjacent land that, ironically, Richard Harrington was forced to sell when his bank faced financial difficulties following questionable investments in a failed mining venture. Victoria and Isaac welcomed 3 more children, twin daughters, Sarah and Elizabeth, in 1885, and another son, James, in 1888. Their family divided their time between the ranch and the rooms above the store, creating a life that bridged town and country in a way that satisfied both parents' needs. On the 10th anniversary of the dust storm that had brought them together, Isaac surprised Victoria with a special outing to Shadow Lake, the site of their engagement, and a place that had become sacred in their shared history. "You ever regret it?" Isaac asked as they sat together on a blanket, watching their children playing along the shoreline under Emmett's watchful eye. "Being caught in that storm, losing your sight temporarily." Victoria considered the question thoughtfully, her gaze taking in the life they had built, their healthy, happy children, the successful businesses they had nurtured together, the deep and abiding love that had only strengthened through a decade of partnership. "Not for a moment," she replied, squeezing his hand. "That dust storm was terrifying, yes, but it blew me straight into your path. Without it, we might never have met, never have discovered what we could build together." Isaac drew her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I thank God every day that I found you," he murmured. "My beautiful, blind stranger on a frightened horse." Victoria laughed softly at the memory. "And I thank God for the cowboy who led my horse to safety and my heart to its home." Their life together wasn't without challenges, droughts that threatened the ranch, economic downturns that affected the store, childhood illnesses that brought sleepless nights of worry. But through it all, Victoria and Isaac remained steadfast partners, their love a constant foundation upon which everything else was built. The dust storm that had once seemed like Victoria's darkest moment had, in truth, been the wind that carried her to her brightest future, one filled with love, family, and purpose in a land she now called home.